on products that did include agricultural products such as soybeans, tree nuts, and processed foods, and so on. And then the US then imposed a blanket 20% tariff on all EU imports. So this did obviously impact trade between both partners. But what I'm going to do, I'm going to try and create like a web that will tie in the different regions. So I'll pay attention mostly right now with what occurred with soybeans. So the US is one of the major suppliers of soybeans to the EU, right? But now with the tariffs in place, it made it very difficult for the US to supply the EU, right? And what then happened was you find the EU then dealing in negotiations with other trading partners that are able to become alternative suppliers for this. And this is where Brazil played a key role during the past few months. And we're going to speak a lot about Brazil. I think they have probably gained the most in regards to managing to solidify, trade relations with countries that have been affected by the tariffs. So the Brazil is the main competitor to the US when it comes to soybeans. So they've engaged in, several negotiations with the EU to try and, you know, uh, strengthen their trade relationships, you know, uh, because of the tariffs that have occurred that have affected trade with the US. Now, then we move to China, right? And as I've mentioned before, the tariffs escalated north of 120% regarding Chinese exports to the US and north of 140% regarding US exports to China. So the escalation was quite excessive. I think it was the most excessive of all the countries affected. And then if we tie up our web again, if we pull from the soybeans as well. So the US was supplying a significant amount of soybeans to China, right? And obviously that trade is now affected with the tariffs uh, that have been in place this year. And then we come back again to Brazil, and we see that Brazil as well is the major beneficiary of this particular situation. So we've put together a chart for you on the right where you can see this chasm which has been growing more clearly. And I think it's more interesting with China. They have actually anticipated that relations with the US would be continually strained. So they have looked to shore up trading partnerships with other countries. So with Brazil, for example, when we look at soybeans, so Chinese imports of soybeans from the US have declined during the period that we focused on from 2021 to 2024. So they have declined by 31.5%, right? Dropping from 32.3 million metric tons in 2021. And then if you look at the line above, that shows the Chinese imports of soybeans from Brazil. And you can see that has gone up significantly by 28.4% to about 74.65 million metric tons in 2024. So you see that gap continues to widen, and it will definitely continue to widen this year, given the acceleration of the tariffs between both nations. So Brazil continues to benefit. So China as well, and we continue to tie up that web. China as well has been engaging in the discussions to try and shore up trade with the EU as well, because all of them are trying to, increase partnerships and trade between them to reduce the reliance on the US. Then now we move to Africa. So the most significant issue regarding Africa is the AGOA, the African Growth and Opportunity Act. So previously, African countries have had significant benefit in supplying the US market with agricultural products duty free through the AGOA. But then now, this year, because of the tariffs that have been placed, a lot of 10% baseline tariffs have affected a lot of African countries. It has made the U.S. market, um, less desirable and a lot more difficult to penetrate. And this has affected a lot of different products. So we look at, for example, Kenyan avocado and tea, um, which Victor can speak more to, a Ghanaian cocoa as well, South African citrus, where I'm based currently. This it has affected trade significantly because South Africa supplies about 9% of its citrus to the U.S. market. Now, given the tariffs that have been imposed this year, it has created uncertainty regarding whether or not the AGOA will be renewed. So it's due to expire in by the end of September this year, and there is now speculation as to whether or not this will be extended. If it does not get renewed, it will have significant impact on the trade between African nations and the US. If we focus on South African citrus as an example, we estimate that there could be losses of revenue northward of 52 million US dollars if this agreement is not renewed. So we will continue to pay attention to these developments later this year and keep you informed. So, besides China, a lot of Asian countries have been affected, and Korea is one interesting case as well, because they have also had tariffs that have been placed on them. And initially, the tariffs were up to 25%. They have been reduced to 10% for a period of 90 days as well. But this has made the issue regarding beef trade between both trading partners quite, interesting because the U.S. has requested China to lift its ban on beef from cattle aged 30 months and older. But obviously, the tariffs that have been placed on Korean products coming into the US make this discussion a bit more complicated. And also, we see that when it comes to beef in particular, the increase in competition from, foreign beef into the Korean market has made it a bit more difficult for suppliers of Hanu beef in Korea, which is a local breed, and this has affected prices. So you see, we have a chart there where the prices of Hanu wholesale beef has been going down in 2025. If you compare to the heights of 2023, for example, according to the chart, it has gone down significantly. So whether or not Korea will lift this ban, we still need to follow developments and see what will be decided. However, it will have benefits on local suppliers if the ban remains in place, and also the discussions regarding the current tariffs and what will continue to develop will also be key. So we'll keep an eye on that as well. And also remaining on the issue of beef, beef trade has been impacted significantly, and our local analyst Victor has followed this for the duration of the year. So we've seen that prices in the US beef sector have been rising due to shrinking cattle herd, but also the recent tariff adjustments. So if you see, we have a chart there to the bottom, and you can note the rise in the wholesale beef prices. So we noted that the average FOB price for fresh chilled and frozen beef, it went up to about $9.62 per kg in February, which is the highest, close to the record high of $9.70 per kg in January 22. So prices are expected to continue rising, with domestic prices anticipated to reach new highs by summer. But also, we anticipate that consumers will start to shift from beef to more affordable alternatives such as pork and poultry. So we'll see how that develops in the coming months. Another issue as well that we have taken note of is how the tariffs have affected trade routes, and we have spoken about it throughout this presentation, but also how it has affected freight rates. So when the tariffs were announced, it complicated shipments within certain trade routes, right? And then this affected the pricing. So we have been tracking this price trend. So if you look at the chart that we've put for you on the top right corner there, it actually shows a direct impact of the announcement of the tariff. So in January, you see the index was at $3,945 per container, and then it dropped significantly to about 2,046 US dollars per container in April. So that period aligns with the escalation of the announcement of the tariffs. And then now with the 90-day rollback in tariffs between the US and China to 30%, you can see that the prices are beginning to stabilize. So in May, which is when the announcement was made, you see the prices have gone up slightly to 2,124 US dollars per container. So it's anticipated that prices will start to trend higher, for the next 2 months during this 90-day rollback, and we'll see what will occur after that and how the impact will be. But also, importers are front loading ahead of these upcoming tariff deadlines in July and August. Right. So, regarding the outlook, we have gone through, I think, most of the major regions and how they've been impacted. So we do anticipate, for example, the AGOA is going to expire in September 2025. So we'll be looking forward to a renewal or non-renewal, but developments regarding that will be key. So that's one thing to look out for. The 90-day rollback between US and China as well, that is set to expire. So we'll look to how that will affect trade between both nations. And as we've explained, there is a web that interconnects so many different trading partners. So whether tariffs escalate from that point or whether they reduce will have a significant impact on how global trade aligns. And also, we have the situation with the EU that we spoke about, and there are ongoing negotiations between the US and the EU, and we'll wait to see how those negotiations materialize. And also, interestingly, in the US, there are the 2026 elections that are coming up. And I think trade policy is going to be one of the major issues that will be discussed during this period. So, obviously, from a US point of view, the tariffs have been polarizing. So there are certain players that will um, probably want the tariffs to remain in place and those that will want them to be cancelled out. So, for example, those that are exporting out to many of the regions that we've mentioned will have lost a significant amount of market share this year and will hope that the tariffs are rolled back. However, those that are primarily focusing on the domestic market would have benefited by reduced competition from foreign partners and also the escalation of the prices locally. So they would also prefer that the tariffs remain in place. So the discussions regarding trade policy will be very key for all the industry players to pay attention to. So those are the major issues to look out for the rest of this year and moving into 2026. Thank you very much for your time. Boyan, you can go ahead.
Thank you, MZ. We are having some technical issues regarding the posting of the questions, and I urge you to please chat section on the LinkedIn Twitch webinar event. Once again, thank you, MZ, for your overview on impact of tariff adjustments and policies affecting the global agricultural trade. So now we will move on to the panel discussion part, our more lively discussion about the current specific topics in each of the panel speakers' target markets. But briefly, let me just summarize MZ's presentation. In 2025, the global agri-food markets experienced significant disruptions driven by aggressive US tariff policies, and the US introduced a best applied 10% tariff on most imports, with much higher rates for specific countries like China. It also targeted Canada, Mexico, and the EU. This has triggered, as MC mentioned, a series of retaliations, most notably from China and the EU, on key American agricultural products such as soybeans, corn, pork, and wine. As a result, the global trade is realigning, with nations diversifying their sourcing away from the US. It has emerged as a major alternative for China and the EU. These trade wars are compounded by other geopolitical tensions covered as well in the panel discussion part. And the outlook suggests continued volatility with the 2026 US elections and ongoing trade negotiations, signaling further potential shifts in policy. Like I mentioned before, the entire presentation of the webinar, along with the recordings, will be available within 3 business days via email. And now let's move on. Again, during the panel discussion, if you have any question, please post it in the LinkedIn page of Twitch event, and we will address them during the Q&A sessions and after the panel discussion. As I mentioned before, our panelists for today are Keula Bang, Alper Akurt, and Victor Vangat. They will help us dive into some of your questions today. But before we start, let's give them an opportunity to present themselves. Can you please introduce yourself? We start with Alper, then Gelua, then Victor. Alper, please introduce yourself just briefly.
Thank you, Bojan. Hi, everyone. I'm Alper Akurt, Global Supply Chain Manager at Twitch. For almost 4 years, I have been helping businesses across Turkey, the Turkic countries, CIS, and Balkans, and East Europe to make smarter decisions with real-time data and trade insights. So I'm looking forward to answering your questions today.
Hi everyone, I'm Gula. I work at the Twitch headquarters, working in the division for the capital market and business development. I get to meet a lot of customers and stakeholders. So if you have any question regarding our services in more detail with the customer cases, you can really ask any questions, and I try to answer you for the people. Thank you.
Hello everyone. My name is Victor Angat. I'm a global market analyst specializing in meat, dairy, and other agri-food products. I'm joining you from Kenya, and I'm really looking forward to a meaningful and insightful discussion. Thank you.
Thank you everyone for the introduction. And let's move on to the first question. From your perspective, what has been the single most significant tariff adjustment or geopolitical event in the past year impacting the agri-food markets? Albert, can you open the panel discussion part?
Sure. Well, in my view, the most impactful event over the past year has been the disruption and reconfiguration of the Black Sea grain corridor. Its collapse, followed by limited reopening attempts, sent shockwaves far beyond Russia and Ukraine, and it created serious pricing volatility, forced many countries, including Turkey, and rethink their grain procurement strategies, and triggered a logistical domino effect across the Balkans, East Europe, and Central Asia. And Turkish millers and traders, for example, suddenly had to shift from well-established routes to less familiar origins, often bearing higher freight and insurance costs. This wasn't just a supply issue, it became a risk management issue. And equally important layer was added by politically driven export bans and sudden tariff measures in countries like Hungary and Serbia. These were often politically motivated but had immediate consequences on cross-border trade in grain, meat, and processed products. And buyers across the region began shifting their focus from price to reliability, a mindset shift we haven't seen at this scale before. And these dynamics pushed companies to reevaluate their partnerships and procurement frameworks, prioritizing sustainability and long-term resilience over short-term cost savings. Additionally, broader global trade tensions compounded these challenges. The U.S. introduced near reciprocal tariffs across all imports, including agri-food products, while Turkey responded by raising duties on key U.S. exports like almonds and walnuts. These tips for tariff exchange increased the cost pressures on importers and exporters alike, and further disrupted long-standing trade patterns. In practice, it encouraged regional buyers to diversify their sources and rethink long-term strategies. Taken together, these shocks have reshaped the agriculture trade landscape, creating a lasting shift in how businesses manage both price and risk. And while at first glance, lower U.S. tariffs compared to those facing a competitor might seem like an advantage, for some countries, the broader reality can be quite different. Tariffs are just one part of a much larger picture shaped by shifting trade policies, geopolitical risks, and evolving buyer priorities. Thank you.
Thank you, Alper. Victor, do you have anything to add on the first question?
Yes, I do. According to me, one of the most impactful events in the agri-food sector this year has been the implementation of the baseline 10% tariff increase by the United States. That was in April 2025. This policy shift has raised serious concerns about its compatibility with existing trade agreements and has already begun to exert a negative impact on global agricultural trade. That is particularly affecting African exporters. For example, the new tariff undermines the benefits of the Africa Growth and Opportunity Act, AGOA, as mentioned by MZ earlier. This AGOA was previously allowed duty-free access for many African goods to enter the U.S. market. Although AGOA is set to expire in September 2025, and its renewal remains uncertain, the sudden imposition of the 10% tariff has already made African exports less competitive, risking revenue losses and job cuts in key sectors. For instance, South Africa's citrus industry, which relies heavily on the U.S. as a key export market, it now faces cumulative tariffs of up to 30%. This has not only raised export costs but also disrupted supply chains. Similarly, cocoa exporters in Ivory Coast and Ghana are now subject to a tariff of up to 21%, making their products less attractive to U.S. buyers, who are now increasingly turning to alternative suppliers. Other key agricultural exports, such as coffee from Ethiopia, Uganda, and Kenya, are also expected to see similar challenges. Although demand for specialty Arabica remains strong in the U.S., the imposition of a 10% tariff may prompt buyers to reduce orders, especially for bulk green coffee and lower margin shipments. As a result, African countries are urgently seeking to diversify their export destinations, pivoting toward markets in Europe, China, the Middle East, and also strengthening intra-Africa trade through initiatives like the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. In this case, a key development is China's recent zero tariff initiative for African exports, which is a promising alternative. This policy offers duty-free access for a wide range of agricultural goods, including coffee, cocoa, cocoa, tea, nut, fruit, meat products, and others. This provides African exporters a valuable opportunity to redirect trade flows. Yes.
Thank you, Victor. Yola, moving on to you.
Okay, thank you, Arp and Victor. I'm going to give a briefly touch on topic from more of a Korean point of view. So, living in Korea, which is divided country in North Asia, where relations between neighbors have been very strained. So, I believe the biggest macroeconomic shift we're feeling now is the escalating conflict between the U.S. and China. Traditionally, Korea has taken a pragmatic approach, economy with China and security with the U.S. And thanks to our geographic proximity and comparative advantage, Korea and China were able to build a win-win trade relationship. The tension began under Trump's first term and have returned even stronger under the second term. So the recent re-escalation is pushing Korea to scale down the trade with China. And this applies not just to high-tech industry like semiconductors and AI hardware, but also to the agri-food sector indirectly. Korea isn't a major agri-food exporter. We're mostly a global buyer. So while processed food like ramen, kimchi, and tteokbokki on the K-food level are gaining popularity recently, but when it comes to the raw materials, we are facing serious limitations. Our cultivable land per capita and farmers very small, making productivity very low, and with the aging population and shrinking rural communities where most agricultural habits come from, we are already vulnerable. So this recent shift is giving Korea a real sense of urgency these days. That's why we are now taking active steps to diversify agri-food sourcings. We are looking beyond China and the US to expand our import portfolio. Especially the 8 items are very important, like feed corn, feed wheat, plus low sugar, palm oil, wheat, corn, soybeans, and soybean oil. They're particularly important because we are depending hugely from the other markets. Historically, Korea has maintained strong food safety-driven import regulations, but with food prices really soaring high, even regulatory bodies these days are realizing that we have to open our market further. So many domestic media are urging the government to do so, and private companies are actively exploring new trading partners beyond their usual suppliers. We're really shocked. The market was Trump introduction of a so-called reciprocal tariff, which could go up to 25%. The irony is under Korea and US FTA, most of US goods are entering into Korean market with zero tariff at the moment. So the message was clear to Korea: don't rely too heavily on China or the US. So we're expecting to strengthen the tie with countries like Philippines, Vietnam, and Latin America, and European nations, which we already have FTAs, and also African nations to build stronger ties than ever before. So although Korea has long been known for tough quarantine standards, the conditions are making it harder to maintain the status quo. As food and beverage prices in Korea are among the highest globally, the combination of inflation, geopolitical tensions, and tariff shocks is driving Korean players to act fast and explore new options. Thank you.
Thank you, Gela. Really interesting points. Before we move on to the second question, it seems our chat section is working again. I encourage our attendees and participants of the webinar to post their questions on the chat section on LinkedIn and YouTube, and we can address them after the panel discussion in the Q&A session. So moving on to the second question. What role can technology, data analytics, and platforms like Twitch play in helping businesses better anticipate and navigate the complexity introduced by tariff volatility and geopolitical instability in commodity trading. For these questions, we will take on Victor, you first.
Right. In today's fast-changing global trade landscape, technology, data analytics, and platforms such as Stretch, they have become absolutely essential for agribusiness. This is because they assist companies make smarter decisions, spot potential risk early, and find better ways to diversify their markets when things get unpredictable. One of the biggest advantages of using platforms like Tridge is the ability to track and map out global supply and demand in real time. So when trade routes get disrupted or tariffs suddenly go up, exporters can quickly shift gears, finding new buyers and suppliers in regions that are more stable or offer better trade terms. For example, South Africa citrus exporters, who are now burdened by a 30% tariff on exports to the US, can use TRID to focus on low or zero tariff markets, such as the Middle East and Asia. In particular, they can easily find verified partners in China, leveraging the recent zero tariff initiatives for African agricultural products and maintain competitiveness. Additionally, subscribing to Tridge, platforms like Tridge, gives stakeholders access to daily markets updates, expert opinions, and tailored outlook reports, enabling them to stay informed and make proactive decisions in a fast-changing trade environment. That is it from my side.
Thank you, Victor. We will get back to you.
Okay, thank you, Victor. So as I introduced, and I'm working at the Business Development Division at Twitch headquarters, so I get to engage directly with many of our clients. So while Trump tariff announcements were clearly negative for many industries, especially for the agri-food, for Twitch business model, they kind of created unique opportunities. We saw a sharp increase in inquiries right after the announcement. Especially from a country that relied heavily on exporting raw or minimally processed food products to the US. This country were urgently looking for alternative source options. And as a result, we got inbound leads and actual conversion rate went up really significantly. So I'm going to give you one concrete example. So a client with offices in the US and factories in Mexico reached out to us. And within just 3 weeks, they adopted our market intelligence solution at a deep level. This company sourced fresh avocado from Mexico. To make guacamole, which they sold in the US. But after a Trump tariff announcement, even though the avocado were later excluded, they became highly aware of the risk on depending almost entirely on Mexican avocado. Their strategy team came across Trigi's open data and became our customer and quickly began exploring options in Dominican Republic, Chile, and Peru. So what Trigi, which is our most updated product, provide is visibility, full picture of a supply chain. Most company only know their direct suppliers or the buyer. But if you use the Twitch Eye, our product, you can see the full landscape from the production side to the table. So of course, our data density varies by country, but in the agriculture sector, I'm confident that we have the most comprehensive data set globally on a single platform. Before, companies were essentially making uninformed decisions, and now with the Twitch Eye, now they can start with a clearer map, which help reduce trial and errors and uncover the trading opportunity that were used to be impossible to spot. I'm gonna give you another example, a Korean example case. One of our Korean clients run a nationwide coffee franchise. They had been sourcing from Brazil and Vietnam, but the coffee bean prices soared due to climate change issues there. So they were actively looking for alternatives. Through Twitch Eye, they selected Ethiopia as a new sourcing country, and they just began their first transaction a few months ago. This created a significant cost saving, like $2 to $3 per kilogram, but if this amounts to millions, considering the volume they purchase every month. So we have a lot of story like this and treats. So I'm gonna say treats just doesn't offer the data. We are helping clients take control of the uncertainty. Thank you.
Yes, I can go on, I think. So thank you, Geola and Victor, for covering almost all the important points. As my colleagues have already mentioned, the importance, technology and reliable trade intelligence have become essential tool for staying ahead ahead of disruption. What we observed in the past few years is that tariff change and geopolitical events rarely give advance notice, but they leave a long tail of consequences. This is where platforms like Twitch create real value, not by offering general data, but by delivering context-rich insights that help businesses more early and act strategically. Many clients I support in Turkey, the Balkans, and Central Asia use Twitch to track market volatility in real time. For example, when export duties were adjusted in certain meat exporting countries, or when coffee origin price diverged due to political unrest, they could immediately access alternative sourcing options with verified suppliers data and updated pricing trends. What used to take days of fragmented research now happens in minutes. Beyond the data, the intelligence layer matters. Our dashboards and alert systems don't just inform, they help procurement teams detect trends early, monitor trade policy changes, and identify alternative suppliers quickly. In time of uncertainty, agility is everything, and this is exactly where smart solutions like 3Gi help businesses gain actionable real-time insights so they can move reactively rather than reacting too late. Thank you.
Thank you, Alper. Before we move to the third and final question of our panel discussion, I urge our participants to fill out the survey, which I shared on LinkedIn and YouTube. Please fill out and write any feedback to improve our future webinars. Thank you. So moving on to the third question. How do tariff wars and geopolitical instability impact supply chains? And what would be actionable advice for agriculture stakeholders? We go back to you now, Kevala.
Okay, so uncertainty. The market fears one thing really more than anything others, and which is uncertainty. In agri-food, companies already operate a thin margin. Unlike high-tech firms, most brands don't enjoy premium markups. So cost control is key to survival, but tariff wars and geopolitical shocks make that control extremely difficult. So to To me, the solution, one approach is to introduce supply chain AI tools like Treat. Some companies are still hesitant to invest in softwares since it's not something you can physically see, but the value gained from smarter decision often far outweighs the cost of the tool. By letting the AI handle the operational complexity, companies can focus on strategic priorities even during the volatile times like now. It gives them the breathing room and boundaries to pursue growth rather than being stuck in a crisis mode. As the old saying goes, if you know you're not an enemy and you know yourself, you can win every battle. And I think today's context, the enemy is an uncertainty, and that's why I strongly recommend actively using intelligence platforms. These days, it's not just a luxury, but it's becoming more of a necessity in modern supply chain strategy. Thank you.
Victor, do you have anything to add?
Yes, I agree that tariff uncertainties and geopolitical instability continue to present significant challenges to global agricultural supply chains, uh, disrupting operation from the point of production to final delivery. This disruption frequently result in higher export cost, diminished global competitiveness, logistical delays, and reduced profit margins. When tariffs are suddenly imposed or increased, exporters are often confronted with a difficult decision. That is either to absorb the additional cost or pass them on to buyers, both of which can lead decreased demand and profitability. As trade costs rise, even long-established trade routes can collapse, leaving exporters with surplus inventory and compelling buyers to seek alternative, more cost-effective sources. A clear example of this disruption can be seen in Ivory Coast cocoa sector. As the world's largest cocoa producer, the country has long depended on access to major markets like the US and Europe. However, following the recent 21% tariff hike by the US, Ivorian cocoa has become less competitive in the market. In response, US buyers are expected to shift their sourcing strategies toward lower-cost producers in Latin America and Southeast Asia. This trend threatens to reduce order volume from the US market, resulting in income instability for cocoa farmers and exporters in Ivory Coast. In light of these challenges, many Ivorian exporters are now exploring alternative destinations, with particular interest interest in China because of its new zero tariff policy for African products. At the same time, exporters are seeking to strengthen their presence in European markets, although they must now comply with increasingly stringent sustainability and traceability standards. To remain resilient in this changing trade environment, stakeholders must look beyond raw commodity export and prioritize value addition. This is especially important in Africa, where many countries continue to export largely unprocessed agri-products. Investing in domestic processing capabilities presents a critical opportunity. In the case of Ivory Coast, greater investment in domestic cocoa processing and chocolate production could open new consumer markets, create jobs, and increase profit margins through higher value products. This strategic shift would not only mitigate external trade risk, but also enhance long-term competitiveness in the global economy. Thank you.
Thank you, Victor.
The protection.
Okay, so the biggest impact of tariff wars and geopolitical instability on supply chains is the erosion of consistency. So businesses can usually manage cost fluctuations, but what they cannot easily absorb is uncertainty over access, timing, and compliance. We have seen this clearly in my region, where a supplier that was reliable for years suddenly became available due to new export restrictions, currency risks, or border logistics issues. That unpredictability sends ripple effects all the way to the end customer. Right now, the ongoing Iran-Israel conflict and heightened tension around the Strait of Hormuz and another layer of risk. Should shipping routes be disrupted or the strait be closed, a choke point for global oil trade, fuel prices could surge overnight. That would drive up freight rates, raw material costs, and production expenses across food and agriculture sector. Hopefully, it ends with this ceasefire agreement. For agricultural stakeholders, my advice is to stop thinking in terms of fixed pipelines and start building flexible ecosystems. The first step is to diversify both sourcing and demand channels. Having three reliable origins is no longer a backup plan, it is the plan. Second, strengthen your market awareness, not only through public news, but also by analyzing trade behavior signals, what buyers are shifting toward, where suppliers are withdrawing, and how prices are moving across different regions. This level of insights allows for faster reactions and fewer surprises. It's also critical to establish strong traceability and compliance processes, knowing exactly where your products come from and ensuring they meet varying standards in different countries can help you avoid last-minute shipment delays or rejections at border points. Finally, this is where we see Twitch becoming an important partner in the resilience strategy of many businesses. Through transaction level analysis, alternative supplier identification, and cross-market price comparisons, we help companies navigate change with confidence rather than confusion. And you can't stop geopolitical risk, but you can outpace its effects with the right tools and partnerships. And since this is the last question, with your permission, I would like to conclude by sharing a few words about Twitch and who we are. We are not just mapping markets, we are connecting lives. Every shipment, Every handshake, every prize is part of a greater story, one where farmers, traders, buyers thrive as one. At Rich, we put our hearts into this work because we believe a better, fairer food system is built when we grow together. Thank you.
Thank you, Alper, and thank you for the extra thoughts. Moving on to the Q&A section, we had some technical difficulties earlier on the webinar, but now our chat section is working. I still encourage our participants to post their chats. If we cannot cover it today, we will get back to you via 3 business days via email with the answers. Also, I must please you for filling out a survey for the webinar to help us improve the future webinars. So to sum it up briefly, we had an overview of the impact of tariff adjustments and geopolitical shifts of key commodity markets, as well as a lively discussion about specific cases of tariff impacts and supply chain disruptions. Based on our panel discussion and the presentation from MZ, the most significant recent geopolitical events and tariff adjustments such as US-China tensions, new US tariff affecting African exports, and the Black Sea grain corridor disruption have collectively created profound uncertainty and volatility in global agri-food markets. This has disrupted traditional supply chains, and like Alper mentioned, you need a ABC plan for covering current trade and disruption of the agribusinesses. And the core response has been a widespread move towards diversifying sourcing, like Geula mentioned, and export markets, like Victor covered, to mitigate risk. And of course, in this complex environment, technology, data analytics, and intelligence platforms have been essential tools enabling stakeholders to navigate this instability by providing the visibility and insights needed to identify alternative partners and make proactive, informed decisions. Once again, I understand it was a lot of information, but we were really able to get through a lot of in a short amount of time. And again, the presentation slides will be shared in a follow-up email within 3 business days. As I mentioned earlier before, and Alper and Geula, Victor and MZ, we have a new service, 3GI, which is an advanced AI-powered intelligence solution designed to provide the strategic advances in the agri-food trade. It functions by integrating a company's internal operation data with external market intelligence, turning complex information into clear, actionable insights. The platform addresses critical industry challenges like price volatility, which we covered in today's webinar, and a lack of market visibility through a suite of specialized tools. These include iSpeaker for tailored generated AI reports, iShelf for deeper data market analysis, and iBook for monitoring internal performance against market benchmarks. By connecting personalized data with real-time market dynamics, 3GI empowers businesses to optimize strategies, uncover cost-saving opportunities, and make faster, more confident decisions. Also, which I mentioned before at the beginning of the webinar, is the 3GPay service. 3GPay is a secure escrow service designed specifically for cross-border business-to-business transaction. Is also repeating myself, we are in partnership with Deutsche Bank, which protects both buyers and suppliers by holding funds in a secure escrow account. This system ensures payment is released to the suppliers only after shipment conditions are met and verified by the buyers. This enforced delivery and payment process mitigates risk like fraud and non-payments, building the confidence needed to foster strong trading partnerships. So, thank you everyone for joining us today. If you have any other questions, please feel free to email us at intelligence@tridge.com. We look forward to hearing from you, and on behalf of Tridge and our speakers, thank you for joining us today, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you all.
Yeah.